Before humans stumbled onto the galactic stage, the Milky Way operated with a calm, predictable order that had persisted for millennia. The chronometric concordance. Ancient beings obsessed with perfect timekeeping dominated the political landscape with their millennia-spanning schedules and unwavering commitment to cosmic punctuality. Every celestial event, diplomatic meeting, and cultural exchange operated according to timetables drafted thousands of years in advance. The galaxy's civilizations existed in a state of comfortable stagnation, stable, predictable, and thoroughly resistant to change. Into this orderly universe came humanity. The first contact event would forever be recorded in galactic archives as the Great Disruption of Meditation Moon. A small human exploration vessel, the ESS Curiosity, had detected unusual energy patterns emanating from what appeared to be an uninhabited satellite orbiting a gas giant in the Cygnus Arm. Captain Eliza Warren, following standard first contact protocols, led a small team to investigate. What they didn't realize was that they had stumbled upon the millennial silent contemplation of the Zephyrians, a species of telepathic floating crystalline entities who gathered once every 1,000 years for an uninterrupted century of complete silence and meditation. Captain Warren, interpreting the gathering of thousands of floating crystals as some kind of natural phenomenon or perhaps an abandoned installation, attempted communication via standard channels. Receiving no response, as the Zephyrians were deep in their meditative trance, she made what would become a historically catastrophic assumption. This looks like some kind of abandoned ceremonial space. Maybe we should show respect by initiating a cultural exchange. Within hours, the exploration team had set up what they called a welcome party, complete with portable speakers blasting Earth's greatest hits, heavily weighted toward rock classics from the 20th and 21st centuries. A buffet of human foods and colorful strobe lighting they believed would complement the natural bioluminescence of the crystals. The Zephyrians, jolted from their once-per-millennium meditation by AC/DCs back in black at concert volume, experienced what their historians would later describe as the collective metaphysical equivalent of a cold water splash on a sleeping elder. The psychic shock rippled through their consciousness, shattering 3 of the oldest members and causing a telepathic scream that was detected by sensitive species as far as 12 parsecs away. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session just 3 standard cycles later. The initial classification for humans read, Categorization D-17, concerning minor nuisance with propagation risk. Scholarly papers with titles like The Hyperactive Mammal Syndrome, A Psychosocial Analysis of Earth's Dominant Species, and Disruption as Diplomatic Strategy, Accidental or Calculated, circulated among academic institutions across 17 sectors. Most civilizations expected the humans would be quickly contained, perhaps relegated to a supervised development zone with limited interstellar access until they matured into a properly predictable species. This assessment changed approximately 8 standard months later when a human maintenance technician named Ravi Kumar visited the Oracle machine of Xylos. The Oracle machine was a computational marvel that had accurately predicted galactic economic trends for over 12,000 years. Its caretakers, the Xylosian Order, maintained a quantum crystal computing core with ritualistic precision. When the machine began showing signs of prediction degradation, 27 of the Order's finest engineers spent 3 years analyzing the problem, concluding that a complete rebuilding of the tertiary calculation chambers would be required, a 50-year project at minimum. Kumar, visiting as part of the human cultural exchange, listened to their explanation for approximately 7 minutes before asking, "Have you tried turning it off and on again? And maybe giving it a good whack on the side? These old systems sometimes just need a reset and a bit of percussive maintenance." The Xylosian engineers were horrified at the suggestion. The Oracle had never been completely powered down in its entire 12 millennia operational history. The idea of striking the sacred machine was considered blasphemous. Kumar, mistaking their stunned silence for consideration, approached the main control panel, located what he correctly identified as a primary power sequencer, initiated a complete shutdown, counted to 30, restarted the system, and then, as the horrified Xylosians watched, gave the housing of the quantum core 3 solid thumps with the heel of his hand. When the system completed its reboot sequence, the Oracle machine not only returned to its previous accuracy, but showed a 23% improvement in predictive capacity. Kumar, noticing a small misalignment in the crystal array that became visible during the reboot, had also straightened it using a bent paperclip from his pocket. The incident report filed by the Xylosian Order to the Galactic Council included a phrase that would become increasingly common in human interaction logs. They solve problems in ways that should not work, and yet somehow do, possibly through violation of fundamental cosmic principles we have yet to identify. A Witness Collective observer later noted in her private log, "It should be considered that humans evolved on a planet that seems actively dedicated to killing them every Tuesday. Their problem-solving approaches reflect this adversarial relationship with basic reality." The Galactic Council upgraded humanity's classification to Category B3, potentially beneficial disruptive entity. This was the first time in Council history that beneficial and disruptive had appeared in the same classification. Following the Oracle incident, human interactions with galactic society accelerated rapidly. An inevitable pattern began to emerge. First contact with any new species typically progressed through predictable stages: initial fascination, cultural exchange, minor conflicts, followed by gradual integration and normalization of relations. Humans, however, seem to operate by a different protocol. Initial fascination, accidental disruption, well-intentioned intervention, catastrophic misunderstanding, improvised solution, and finally, fundamental transformation of the encounter culture. The first major escalation came when Captain Thomas Leong, introduced the concept of retail therapy to the harmonious exchange, a galactic economic system based on rational trade and genuine need that had remained stable for over 40,000 years. The exchange operated on principles of measured growth and utility. No citizen of any member civilization ever purchased anything without careful consideration of its necessity, sustainability, and long-term value. The very concept of impulse buying was not merely foreign but incomprehensible. Leong, invited to speak at an economic forum about Earth development, casually mentioned how humans often purchased items they didn't need because it feels good or to cheer themselves up after a bad day. When pressed by confused economists, he elaborated on concepts like retail therapy, keeping up with the Joneses, and the status symbol economy. The MRLNT, an insectoid species known for their rapid adoption of novel concepts, were the first to experiment with what they termed emotional acquisition. Within a single cycle, their colonies had embraced conspicuous consumption with alarming enthusiasm. The trend spread like a mimetic virus through the exchange. Species began purchasing decorative items with no function, upgrading perfectly functional technology from marginally improved versions, and, most shockingly to traditional economists, going into debt to finance their consumption. The resulting economic disruption forced an emergency session of the Galactic Council, which lasted for 17 standard cycles without break. The outcome was the first edition of the Guidelines for Human Interaction, a document that would grow from its original 47 pages to over 12,000 in just 5 years. The first edition contained oddly specific warnings that revealed the Council's growing alarm. Human individuals must not be allowed access to galactic credit systems without supervision by at least 3 representatives from species with no concept of compound interest. All economic explanations offered by humans should be verified by non-human economists before implementation, especially concepts described as simple or obvious. The term "you only live once" should be treated as a linguistic warning sign, indicating potentially irrational decision-making to follow. Under no circumstances should the human concept of fashion be explained to MRLNT representatives. The cultural misunderstandings continued to multiply. A particularly noteworthy incident occurred when a human linguistic team attempted to help the chromescentients, a species that communicates through complex color patterns emanating from their translucent bodies. The humans, believing they were providing valuable educational resources, presented the chroma diplomats with Pantone color matching systems and basic color theory textbooks. What the humans failed to understand was that for chroma sentience, colors were not abstract concepts but integral aspects of their identity and consciousness. The introduction of standardized color systems suggested that their personal color expressions, unique as fingerprints and central to their sense of self, could be reduced to numeric codes and reproduced mechanically. The resulting existential crisis spread through chroma society, leading to what they called the Great Dimming, a period where many chromosentients reduced their color expression to muted grays as they questioned the uniqueness of their being. Recovery took decades, though ironically, the experience eventually led to a renaissance in chroma art and philosophy, with new schools of thought embracing the tension between standardized expression and individual uniqueness. Human adaptability continued to manifest in non-military contexts as well. When a life support failure at the Glibalax outpost threatened both human and Glibalax representatives with asphyxiation, the Glibalax requiring pure methane to breathe, the station's lone human engineer, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, constructed emergency filtration systems using dirty socks, local vegetation, and a broken coffee maker. The improvised system not only kept everyone alive for the 3 days required for rescue, but reportedly improved the station's air quality to the point where several Glibalax later complained about the excessively purified atmosphere after returning to their homeworld. As incidents multiplied, the guidelines for human interaction expanded accordingly, becoming increasingly desperate in tone. By the third revision, the document included an entire chapter titled Recognizing and Preventing Helpful Human Interventions Before Irreversible Cultural Change Occurs. It was during the fourth revision meeting that Ambassador Z.K. Trowell of the Witness Collective made what was intended as a macabre joke. Perhaps we should designate a planet to memorialize all the civilizations that humans have improved beyond recognition. The suggestion received uncomfortable laughter, but Dr. Nver Blim, the Council's chief historian, made a notation in his personal records. This dark humor took on prophetic significance as humanity's influence continued to spread. The phenomenon that would later be termed aggressive helpfulness found its perfect expression in the human intervention on Colony Sylvana, an outpost of the peace-oriented Sylvans, plant-like beings dedicated to photosynthesizing in tranquility. The colony had been experiencing a slight decline in growth rates due to suboptimal solar radiation levels. When a human agricultural consultant named Maria Foster was invited to offer minor suggestions, she arrived with a comprehensive plan to revolutionize their approach. Within months, the previously serene forest temple had been transformed into what Foster proudly called a state-of-the-art agronomic facility. The peaceful meditation glades were replaced with precisely arranged growing fields. Noisy machinery operated around the clock, optimizing soil conditions and supplementing natural light. Chemical fertilizers boosted growth rates, while automated harvesting systems ensured maximum efficiency. The once quiet Sylvan songs were drowned out by the constant mechanical hum of what Foster called progress. Productivity increased by 328%. The colony's output now exceeded that of any other Sylvan settlement in the galaxy. And the Sylvans themselves were altered. Their slow, deliberate movements became hurried and anxious. Their traditional communal meditation cycles were interrupted by constant maintenance schedules. Their very physiology changed, with new shoots growing faster but weaker, leaves developing tougher surfaces against the chemical exposure. When Elder Greenroot, the colony's oldest member, was asked about these changes, their response was recorded by a Witness Collective observer. "We are more, but somehow less. Our branches reach higher, but our roots grow shallow. We produce more, but create less. We have learned efficiency at the cost of essence." Cultural contamination spread through more subtle channels as well. The youth of the ancient Zantusi civilization, known for their formal communication based entirely on intricate haiku and deliberate ceremonial movements, began incorporating human slang and emoticons gathered from unfiltered Earth entertainment broadcasts. Xantusi elders were horrified when, during a sacred coming-of-age ceremony, a young initiate responded to the ritual question about the nature of wisdom with, "LOL, no clue." Vibes matter though, NGL. Even more concerning to the Galactic Council was the discovery that many civilizations were secretly consuming human entertainment. Philosophical debates among the telepathic Gondwana collective were interrupted by unauthorized thought patterns clearly derived from human cooking competitions. The historically solemn astral judiciary of Parnassus had to reprimand 3 high judges for mentally replaying human sitcoms during critical sentencing hearings. The Witness Collective, tasked with observing and documenting major galactic developments with perfect neutrality, found their reports on human activity growing increasingly strained in their attempt to maintain objective language. A typical entry might begin with proper scientific detachment. This cycle observed human-initiated variations in Melbotian trading protocols, only to devolve several paragraphs later into barely contained exasperation, resulting in market fluctuations that defy all established economic theory, yet somehow generated profit for all involved parties, through mechanisms this observer cannot explain without using profanity. Some species attempted to resist human influence through direct confrontation. Most notably, the logic masters of Ryla, a civilization that had built their entire society on perfect rational consistency for over 15,000 years, attempted to engage humans in formal debate, confident that their superior reasoning would bring humanity into logical compliance with galactic norms. The logic masters sent their greatest champion, grand rationalist to Earth for a publicized debate with human philosophers. The event was broadcast across 17 sectors. IFKTCL began with a flawlessly constructed argument about the necessity of predictable, stable development and the dangers of Earth's chaotic approach to progress. In response, human philosopher Dr. Hannah Kim smiled and said, "That's an interesting perspective. But what if you're wrong? What if chaos is actually more stable in the long run? What if predictability creates fragility? What if the occasional, because it's fun, is actually a sophisticated evolutionary strategy?" What followed was described in Witness Collective records as the unraveling. If KTHL attempted to counter with formal logic, only to be met with hypotheticals, paradoxes, and philosophical thought experiments that challenged the foundational assumptions of Rylhan thought. After 6 hours, the grand rationalist fell silent for 3 full minutes before asking, "But what about the trolley problem? If we accept your earlier premise about utilitarianism being contextual, then surely." The debate continued for another 14 hours. Upon returning to Ryla, IFKL secluded themselves in meditation for a full cycle, emerging dramatically changed. They began creating abstract art, writing poetry without meter, and proposing government reforms based on what they now called intuitive resonance patterns. Rylhan society fractured along philosophical lines, with traditionalists attempting to maintain pure logic, while reformists embraced what they termed quantum reasoning, a pragmatic approach that incorporated emotional intelligence and intuitive leaps alongside traditional deduction. It was at this point that Dr. Blim, recalling Ambassador Catral's grim joke, formally proposed the establishment of a memorial site. The Galactic Council, now an almost perpetual emergency session dealing with human-related incidents, approved the proposal without debate. Thus, the Galactic Graveyard was established on New Trolley 7, a small, beautiful world with rolling purple fields and a constant gentle breeze. The opening ceremony was a subdued affair. No humans were officially invited, though 3 did show up anyway, having heard about it through a friend and thinking it sounded interesting. The first visitors were often confused by the memorial's design, row upon row of identical markers, all bearing the same name. A Witness Collective guide would explain, with practiced patience, "This is not a graveyard for humans. This is a graveyard of what species were before humans encountered them." The first official marker commemorated the logic masters of Ryla, whose society's unbroken 15,000-year dedication to pure reason had been irreversibly altered. The inscription read simply, "The Logic Masters of Ryla. Pure Reason, 28,331 BCE, 2172 CE. Cause of transformation, human." As decades passed, more markers appeared. The peace-oriented Sylvans of Colony Sylvana received their own monument, commemorating their transition from contemplative photosynthesizers to agricultural industrialists. The chromescentients were memorialized with a marker that slowly shifted colors, representing their journey from existential crisis to a new, more complex cultural identity that incorporated human color theory. One of the most notable additions came after the transformation of the ethyl-red drifters, a species known for 12,000 years of absolute pacifism. The drifters, transparent floating beings who had evolved beyond all forms of conflict or confrontation, have been repeatedly disrupted by well-meaning human diplomatic missions attempting to include them more fully in galactic politics. After the seventh such intervention, the frustrated drifters developed what they called nonviolent deterrent systems, based entirely on principles gleaned from human situation comedy. Diplomatic vessels approaching drifter space without invitation would find their hulls coated with a substance identical to whipped cream, their communication systems broadcasting laugh tracks, and their gravity systems temporarily recalibrated to mimic the effect of stepping on a banana peel. The effectiveness of these measures was unquestionable. Unwanted diplomatic approaches dropped by 94%. But the drifters themselves had fundamentally changed, developing a previously unknown capacity for what they termed strategic mischief. Their marker in the galactic graveyard read, "The ethyl-red drifters. Perfect passivity, 10,254 domi o suta opzit. Cause of transformation, human." Human visitors to the graveyard displayed a reaction that baffled other species. They seemed genuinely touched by the memorial. They brought flowers, typically roses or chrysanthemums, observed moments of respectful silence, and appeared to find the site meaningful rather than accusatory. When asked why they weren't offended by what was essentially a monument to their disruptive influence, one human visitor, an elderly woman named Grace Liu, responded, "It's sad when things change, of course. But change is natural, isn't it? Nothing stays the same forever. The important thing is that these civilizations are still alive, still growing. They're different, not gone. That's worth celebrating, I think." She paused thoughtfully before adding, "Anyone want to grab tacos after this? I saw a fusion place near our hotel, Drifter Mexican cuisine. Apparently, they use zero-gravity cheese." By this point, the guidelines for human interaction had been largely relegated to historical archives. The futility of trying to manage or contain human influence had become apparent to even the most conservative council members. Instead, galactic institutions shifted their focus to adaptation. Courses with titles like Introduction to Abnormal Human Psychology and Practical Response Strategies for Human-Initiated Paradigm Shifts became mandatory at diplomatic academies across the galaxy. The Witness Collective, true to their founding principles, continued documenting these transformations with diligent objectivity. After a century of observations, they produced what would become known as the Catalyst Report, a comprehensive analysis of humanity's role in galactic society. The report's key finding was revolutionary in its simplicity. Humans do not destroy species. They catalyze their transformation into something that incorporates human characteristics. Contact with humanity functions as a form of galactic-level evolutionary mutation. To illustrate this conclusion, the report highlighted the most profound example of all, the transformation of the chronometric concordance, the ancient timekeepers who had once epitomized perfect order. For millennia, the concordance had organized their entire civilization around the precise measurement of time. Their cities were constructed as astronomical calculators. Their social hierarchies were based on chronometric accuracy. Their art consisted entirely of perfectly timed sequences of light and sound. They scheduled activities thousands of years in advance and never, in their entire recorded history, had any member of their species been late for an appointment. Their first significant exposure to humans came when a diplomatic mission arrived 3 days early due to what the human captain described as a lucky shortcut discovered during the journey. Rather than waiting in orbit until the scheduled arrival time, as any civilized species would do, they requested immediate landing clearance since we're already here and all. What followed was 2 centuries of increasing chronological contamination. Humans introduced concepts like fashionably late, ballpark timing, and most distressingly to the concordance, playing it by ear. Human diplomats consistently arrived at meetings a few minutes early or late, citing traffic, interesting distractions, or simply losing track of time. Initially, the concordance responded with horror and strict isolation protocols. But as trade and cultural exchange with other human-influenced species became increasingly important, absolute chronological purity became impossible to maintain. Younger members of the concordance began experimenting with concepts like flexible scheduling and spontaneity within parameters. 300 years after first contact, the chronometric concordance had fundamentally reimagined their society. They still valued precision and scheduling, but had incorporated what they called calculated chaos theory, the practice of deliberately introducing controlled variability into systems to increase resilience and creativity. Their cities now included spaces dedicated to unscheduled interactions. Their art embraced improvisation within structured frameworks. Their diplomatic corps specialized in adaptable negotiation tactics. Their productivity, innovation, and reported life satisfaction had increased dramatically, but they were no longer the species they had been for 50,000 years. Their marker in the galactic graveyard was among the largest. The chronometric concordance, perfect temporal order, 48,297 BCE, 2347 CE. Cause of transformation, human. As the witness collective's reports circulated through galactic academia, a deeper understanding emerged about what the galactic graveyard truly represented. It wasn't a record of destruction, but of identity transformation. What died wasn't the species itself, but its pre-human identity, its original defining characteristics now blended with human traits to create something new. Every tombstone with the inscription human represented not an ending, but a metamorphosis. A civilization that had encountered humanity and become something neither fully what it was before nor simply a human imitation, but a hybrid evolution. Most remarkable was humanity's apparent obliviousness to the profound nature of their influence. A recorded conversation between 2 human tourists at the graveyard captured this perfectly. Bit monotonous, isn't it? All the same name on every stone. Yeah, they could use some variety. Maybe different fonts at least. I wonder if they'd let us at a coffee shop. Something tasteful, mind you. People need somewhere to sit and reflect. Ooh, and maybe a little garden section with plants from all the different worlds. In that exchange lay the cosmic joke at the heart of galactic transformation. Humans survived by adapting so readily to new challenges that they compelled everything else to adapt to them instead. They changed without noticing, causing noticeable change everywhere they went. They broke things by fixing them and fixed things by breaking them. And always, they moved forward, bringing the galaxy along with them whether it wanted to come or not. The universe, it seemed, had developed a sense of humor after all, and it sounded suspiciously like human laughter, which explained why the galactic graveyard had only one name on every tombstone: human. Not because humans killed anything, but because once touched by humanity, nothing remained entirely what it was before. The galaxy wasn't filling with humans. It was filling with post-encounter species, each carrying a piece of humanity forward along with their own transformed identity. As one witness collective observer noted in the final line of the Catalyst report, perhaps, in the end, this is not a graveyard at all, but a nursery for what comes next.